On 13th August 1704, near Blindheim in Bavaria, the Battle of Blenheim changed the War of the Spanish Succession. It still matters because it reshaped Europe's balance of power and proved coalition warfare could decide empires. Europe was already strained by a struggle over who would inherit the Spanish throne. Courts from Vienna to Paris feared a single dynasty dominating the continent, and alliances shifted under constant pressure. France backed one claimant, while Austria and its allies tried to block French expansion. Bavaria became a crucial theatre because its position could open the road toward Vienna. The campaign also depended on personalities under immense strain. Commanders had to satisfy monarchs, hold together allies, and move armies quickly through hostile territory. On the Allied side, leadership was shared between a seasoned imperial commander and a brilliant English general. Their cooperation was politically delicate, but their goals were aligned by necessity. Their opponents relied on a French marshal and Bavarian forces defending a strategic line. They faced the challenge of stretching supply, coordinating allies, and protecting a vulnerable frontier. These armies were large by the standards of the day, but they were still limited by roads, forage, and weather. Muskets, pikes, cavalry, and artillery all depended on fragile logistics. Soldiers carried flintlock muskets and bayonets, while cannon supported the line from a distance. Discipline mattered as much as courage, because a broken formation could unravel quickly. Morale varied widely. Some troops were veterans of long campaigns, while others were exhausted by forced marches, shortages, and the uncertainty of fighting far from home. The Allied army moved with unusual speed across Germany, a march that surprised observers and strained every wagon and horse. Speed itself became a weapon before the battle even began. Villages along the route saw soldiers, horses, and artillery pass in waves. The countryside carried the burden of war even before the first shot was fired at Blenheim. By the time the armies neared the Danube, the terrain began to shape the coming fight. Rivers, marshy ground, and villages would all matter as much as numbers. The battlefield lay in a landscape of open ground, broken by villages and streams. That mix favored neither side completely, but it demanded careful timing and clear coordination. Weather added uncertainty. Summer heat, dust, and haze could blur visibility, while wet ground near the stream slowed movement and complicated artillery placement. The Allied plan aimed to pin the enemy in place and then strike where the line was weakest. It depended on pressure, deception, and the ability to shift forces at the right moment. The French and Bavarian plan leaned on holding key villages and strong positions along the line. If they could absorb the first attacks, they hoped the Allies would lose momentum. At first light, both armies settled into position. The opening phase was defined by artillery fire, probing movements, and the slow realization that the battle would be larger than either side expected. The villages became focal points almost immediately. Holding them meant controlling movement, sightlines, and the ability to reinforce threatened sectors under fire. Elsewhere, cavalry watched for openings, but could not easily force a decision. The ground and the enemy's positions made simple charges risky and often ineffective. As the battle deepened, one sector absorbed mounting pressure. Repeated attacks and counterattacks turned the fight into a test of endurance as much as maneuver. The pressure point emerged when the defenders were forced to commit more men to hold a narrow front. That concentration created strain elsewhere and reduced their flexibility. The Allies responded by widening the threat. Instead of striking only one point, they pressed across a broader front to make the enemy defend everywhere at once. That wider pressure opened the way for a decisive movement. A shift of forces toward the enemy center and flank began to change the battle's balance. Once the movement took hold, the defending line struggled to keep its shape. Units that had been anchored in place found themselves under pressure from several directions. The collapse was not instant, but it was decisive. As one part of the defense gave way, the rest of the position became difficult to sustain. Some troops were cut off, others withdrew in disorder, and the battle's outcome became clear. What had begun as a contest of lines ended as a rout in key sectors. The immediate aftermath was grim in a different sense. Prisoners, exhausted survivors, and shattered formations. The field itself was quieting, even as the strategic consequences began to spread. For the victors, the battle brought relief and prestige. For their opponents, it was a severe setback that weakened confidence and forced a reassessment of strategy. The victory helped protect Vienna and altered the momentum of the war. It also showed that French power, though still formidable, could be checked by coordinated coalition action. In the years that followed, the war continued, but Blenheim changed expectations. Diplomacy, recruitment, and battlefield planning all had to account for a new sense of Allied capability. The battle also influenced military reputation. Commanders who could combine speed, coordination, and pressure across multiple points gained lasting admiration. Historians still qualify the story. They debate how much of the victory came from planning, terrain, chance, and the enemy's own mistakes under pressure. They also note that battle narratives often simplify complex command decisions. In reality, communication was imperfect, and leaders acted with incomplete information. Another debate concerns the human cost in broader terms. Blenheim was a major victory, but it remained part of a long war that continued to consume lives and resources across Europe. The place today is quieter. Fields, roads, and villages now sit where armies once maneuvered, and the landscape invites reflection more than spectacle. Standing there, it is easier to understand how terrain shaped decisions and how quickly a campaign could turn on one day's movement. The battlefield still speaks through the land itself.